Greetings and welcome for all of you who are watching. You're tuned into TMH as we present you our daily English news. Our headlines for today: Isaias Afwerki and Abiy Ahmed's forces launch an extensive offensive on the Rama, Zalambesa, and Arona fronts. Uhuru Kenyatta skips scheduled peace talks, and the European Parliament yet again calls on the Ethiopian government to sign and ratify the Rome Statutes of the ICC. As we move on to our main updates for today, the Isaias Afwerki and Abiy Ahmed regimes and their forces launch an extensive offensive on the Rama, Zalambesa, and Arona fronts. The Central Command of the government of Tigray disclosed that the collaborative invading forces of Isaias Afwerki and Abiy Ahmed's launched the offensive yesterday in the direction of the northeast. The statement indicated that the invaders have inflicted extensive damage on peaceful civilians and their property through a barrage of indiscriminate artillery bombardments against Tigrayans living in Rama Adigrat, as well as other areas bordering Eritrea. Tigray army is defending against the invasion, which according to the statement is an extension of the massive war that was launched now over 40 days ago. Our arch enemies have launched this invasion to wipe the people of Tigray off the face of the earth and inflict whatever destruction they can be by coordinating and mobilizing their combined capabilities, of the Central Command stated. The Central Command also said the government of Tigray called on the people of Tigray to stand shoulder to shoulder with their army and further intensify their campaign of self-defense for the sake of ensuring their survival. Member of Tigray Central Command, Getachew Reda, also wrote on his official Twitter account that the Eritrean army and Abiy Ahmed's forces under its command have, as of yesterday morning, deployed tens of thousands of forces and mechanized units in the Rama, Arona, and Zalambesa fronts, and their renewed round of full-scale offensive yet again. Uhuru Kenyatta has skipped scheduled peace talks. Kenya's former president, again Uhuru Kenyatta, who is a key player in the African Union-led efforts to bring peace to Ethiopia, on Friday said he would be skipping the negotiations, which were expected to begin this weekend, raising doubts over whether the talks would in fact be going ahead. In a letter to the chairman of the African Union, Musa Faki Mahamat, the former president cited a clash in his schedule as the reason for not being in a position to attend. The former president, however, did express commitment to being a party to such a meeting in the future if he is informed prior. He at the same time issued demands on the structure and the modalities of such talks before confirming his participation on this pace. He says, however, in the interim, and as you consider the possibility for another date for peace talks, I'd be grateful to receive further clarity on the structure, on the modalities of the talks, including but not limited to the rules of government for all of the engagement and the interlocutors invited. This clarification would greatly help in preparation for my engagement and my participation. Kenyatta added that the immediate and unconditional cessation of hostilities is among the most urgent issue and high on his agenda as well. He says the silencing of the guns is particularly important in order to avail the right conditions for the consultations and the negotiations while alleviating human suffering and allowing for continued access to humanitarian assistance. Uhuru was given the mandate by President William Ruto, which the announcement during his swearing in on the 13th of September. The European Parliament has called on the Ethiopian government to sign and ratify the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. The European Parliament stressed the need for independent and impartial mechanisms to address ongoing violations and accountability. It strongly condemned the use of starvation as a method of warfare. It also recalled the obstruction of delivery of food and healthcare and denial of just basic services that does amount to crimes against humanity. In her closing statement at the European Parliament, Jansu's European Commissioner had this to say regarding the recent humanitarian human rights situation in Tigray, Ethiopia, notably that of children. Let's take a listen.
We are concerned about children being used as child soldiers. These actions constitute war crimes and crimes against humanity. We should act. We call on the Commission to step up its effort to ensure the safety of children. Besides the danger of war, Ethiopia expects the war's drought. Millions of people will suffer from hunger, including children. That's why we call for an immediate ceasefire and condemn the invasion of Eritrean forces into the region of Tigray. This week, a promising step might be the peace talks between Ethiopia and Tigray leaders in South Africa. The Parliament welcomes the renewal of the mandate of Olusegun Obasanjo as the African Union's High Representative for the Horn of Africa. His role is crucial for facilitating peace talks. The Parliament urged the EU and its member states to request the UN Security Council to hold a regular public meeting on Ethiopia and to ensure humanitarian aid access and protect civilians.
The European Parliament deeply regretted the fact that the UN Security Council has failed to address the situation in Ethiopia and the region in an effective manner. It also urged the EU and its member states to call on the UNSC to hold regular public meetings on Ethiopia and the region, and to finally take meaningful and decisive action to ensure unhindered humanitarian access and allow the protection of civilians, and end and condemn grave violations of international law, and to make sure they ensure accountability for all of the atrocities that have been committed. It also called for an immediate return to constitutional order and for the establishment of a ceasefire monitoring mechanisms. The European Parliament condemned Eritrean forces on the invasion of Tigray, the war crimes and human rights violations by the Eritrean forces committed, and urged the Eritrean government to withdraw its forces from Ethiopia with immediate and permanent effect to ensure accountability for all of its war crimes. Tigrayans in Chicago, USA, state a demonstration against ongoing attacks on civilians in the Tigray region. The demonstrators called for a stop to targeting civilians through aerial bombardments and shellings by the Ethiopian and Eritrean governments. Let's take a listen.
Stop bombing civilians!
Stop bombing civilians!
Stop bombing children!
Stop bombing children!
Stop bombing women!
Stop bombing women!
Stop murdering women!
Stop murdering women!
Stop raping women!
Stop raping women!
Stop starving children!
Stop starving children!
Stop bombing hospitals!
Stop bombing hospitals!
Stop bombing hospitals!
Stop bombing hospitals!
Stop bombing churches!
Stop bombing churches!
Stop bombing churches!
Stop bombing churches!
Stop bombing people!
Stop bombing people!
Stop bombing Tigray!
Stop bombing Tigray!
Protect civilians!
Protect civilians!
Restore communication in Tigray!
Restore communication in Tigray!
Open the banks in Tigray!
Open the banks in Tigray!
The demonstrators also called on the U.S. and the human rights defenders to take immediate action to stop the ongoing gross violations of human rights against the people of being technically mated right now. Tigray's Bureau of Societal Improvement and Gender Equality says the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia should meet survivors of atrocities in Tigray. The Bureau, in press conference in Mekelle last week, requested for further investigations into what happened in Tigray during the last 2 years of this ongoing war and genocide. Let's take a listen.
The experts were not allowed to come to Tigray. They were not allowed to come and interview any of these survivors face to face, check and verify any evidences, and so on and so forth. I mean, the siege is there. Their capacity to do thorough investigation has been limited, and therefore we ask for further investigation and for further thorough documentation and proving of what's happening on the ground.
The Commission, in a report, did release last month disclosing that it faced time and staffing constraints as well as lack of access to the sites and documents, especially due to denial of access by the Ethiopian government. Tigrayan professor to receive the Victor Sedel and Barry Levy Award for Peace, Mulgeta Gabra-እግዚአብሔር, professor of the biostatistics at the Medical University of South Carolina, will receive the prestigious award for bringing global attention to the Ethiopian government's human rights violations against residents of the country's Tigray region. A native of the Tigray region, ገብረ እግዚአብሔር has used published research, global synopsis, and advocacy of world leaders to inform public health professionals and governments and academia about the violent attacks on Tigray's innocent civilians, healthcare infrastructures, and food insecurity. Hundreds of thousands of civilians have died in the last 2 years due to this ongoing scorched earth and siege, starvation, and the policy of the Ethiopian government and its allies on the Tigray region and its peoples. That concludes our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.